My name is Elena Crawford. I'm 38 years old, and 2 weeks before the grand opening of the Alder, Lucas Graham fired me after stealing my entire concept. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. Creative differences. That's what he called erasing 15 years of my life's work. I stood there in the half-lit dining room I designed, watching the man who promised partnership turn my dream into his marketing slogan. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't done cooking yet. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, a boss, a friend, even family, because what happened to me didn't just cost me a job. It forced me to find out what I was really made of. I grew up in a cafeteria that smelled like bleach and canned peaches. My mother, Helen, worked the lunch line at Jefferson Elementary for 23 years. She had a way of turning government-issued beans into comfort food, though no one ever thanked her for it. I remember sitting on the back counter, legs swinging, peeling hard-boiled eggs for the next day's salad. The metal bowls echoed when she dropped the eggs in. Hospitality, she told me once, isn't about the recipe. It's about how you make people feel. I didn't understand it then, but I would spend the rest of my life trying to prove her right. At home, we didn't have much. My sister Naomi was the golden child, straight A's, honor roll, college scholarships. Mom used to save the good china, chipped as it was, for Naomi's celebrations. My victories, small ones, like winning a local baking contest or getting promoted from dishwasher to prep cook, went mostly unnoticed. I pretended it didn't hurt, but when you're the forgotten one long enough, you start building quiet armor. The first real kitchen I ever worked in wasn't glamorous. It was a highway diner with a flickering neon sign that buzzed louder than the radio. The tile floor was slick with grease, and the head cook smoked through his shift, ash hanging dangerously close to the fryer. But I loved it. The rhythm of orders shouted, the hiss of the grill, the slap of spatulas. It all felt like music. My hands learned faster than my mouth could explain. That was the first time someone called me a natural. Years later, after culinary school and too many double shifts to count, I moved to New York. I thought success would smell like truffle oil and champagne. Instead, it smelled like burnt espresso and sweat-soaked chef coats. I worked under men who thought intimidation was leadership, and creativity meant stealing someone else's plating idea. There was one night I remember it because it snowed sideways when a sous chef dumped my entire sauce reduction in the sink because I hadn't plated with passion. I stood there, holding the empty pan, and realized passion didn't mean shouting. It meant staying when everyone else quit. Eventually, I found a mentor, Chef Marina Delgado. She ran a small restaurant in Queens where the floors creaked and the guests felt like family. Food should have fingerprints, she told me. If it's too perfect, it's dead. She taught me how to trust imperfection, to make beauty out of the crooked lines. When she retired, she handed me her worn chef's knife. Keep cutting, she said, but never let anyone dull your edge. I didn't know it back then, but that sentence would echo through my head years later in a boardroom at the Alder, as a man with a perfect smile told me my ideas were too emotional. I met Lucas Graham 5 years after that. He found me through a food expo in Seattle, where I presented a farm-to-table tasting menu built entirely from Oregon. Ingredients: chestnut soup, pear cider glaze, wild mushroom risotto. He approached me afterward, all charm and cologne. You don't cook, he said. You tell stories. I should have heard the warning in that compliment. People like him don't care about stories, only the power they carry. But I was tired of small kitchens, of landlords who raised rent the minute a review went viral. Lucas offered me a dream, creative control, budget, and, most dangerous of all, validation. The Alder was supposed to be my masterpiece. A boutique hotel in downtown Portland, sleek glass facade, reclaimed wood interiors, everything curated to whisper luxury without shouting it. Lucas told me, I want it to feel authentic. That word authentic became our shared language. I designed a concept called Harvest Table, a restaurant that would celebrate Oregon's seasons. Every 6 weeks, we'd rotate menus based on what local farms produced. It wasn't just food. It was rhythm, storytelling, community. The first tasting we did was magical. The staff clapped after dessert hazelnut panna cotta with honey from a farm less than 20 miles away. Lucas smiled at me like he was proud. Later he took my hand briefly and said, You're the soul of this place. I believed him, foolishly. Then came the contract revisions. Lawyers in gray suits slid papers across the table, and I skimmed instead of reading. Termination for creative differences. I remember the clause. It sounded harmless, like a safety net. Naomi, ever the practical sister, warned me. Never trust a man who praises you before he pays you. I laughed it off. She was always the cynic, the realist. I told her, this is different. It wasn't. In the weeks leading up to the opening, we lived and breathed the Alder. My sous chef Ben Torres practically slept in the kitchen. The staff was new, raw, but they believed in the vision. The walls still smelled of fresh varnish and lemon oil. Every night, I'd walk through the dining room after hours, tracing my fingers over the wood grain of the tables I'd picked from a local carpenter. Each piece was unique, imperfect, alive. One evening, I caught Lucas standing in the empty restaurant, staring at the logo, a minimalist wheat stalk embossed in gold. He said, "You know, Elena, when this opens, people will think it's my idea." He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke. I laughed, but my stomach clenched. Something in his tone was off, too casual, too rehearsed. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that smile was the first crack in everything I'd built. A week later, a journalist from Portland Living called me. "We're doing a feature on the Alder's grand opening," she said. "Can I quote you on Lucas's vision for the menu?" I froze. "His what?" She paused. "Oh, I assumed it was his concept. That's what he told us." My chest went cold. I hung up and confronted Lucas in his office the next morning. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "You're overreacting," he said. "This is business. The brand is mine. The food is yours. That's partnership. Then why did you call it your vision?" I asked. He smiled, slow and smug. "Because investors buy vision, not recipes." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mother's voice from years ago, after she lost her small catering business, because her partner registered the company under his own name. "Never let someone else sign what you create," she'd said. I had promised her I never would. Yet here I was, history repeating itself. Only this time the loss hadn't happened yet, but I could already taste it. I wish I could tell you I walked away then. I didn't. I told myself I could fix it, that the work would speak louder than his lies. I didn't know it yet, but sometimes silence is the worst form of complicity. The night Lucas fired me, rain streaked the restaurant windows like silver veins. But the story didn't start there. It started 3 months before, with a whisper from my mother on the phone. "Don't forget who you cook for, Elena. The guests, not the man who signs the checks." She had pneumonia that week, her voice thin, but she still worried about my work. I promised I'd visit soon. I never did. I buried myself in the project. There were menu tastings, wine pairings, endless meetings with marketing teams who talked about branding the experience. I used to smile politely while they debated hashtags for a place that hadn't even served a meal yet. Sometimes I'd escape to the walk-in cooler just to breathe. The hum of the refrigeration unit was the only sound that didn't demand something from me. Ben, my sous chef, was my anchor. We'd worked together at 3 restaurants before the Alder. He had tattoos of herbs along his forearm, basil, thyme, sage, and a steady presence that kept the younger cooks calm. He could tell when something was off. "You okay, boss?" He asked one night while we prepped the first fall tasting. "I'm fine," I lied, chopping apples too fast. "Just tired." He didn't press, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. 2 weeks later, Portland Living ran the story. The headline read, "The Alder's Visionary. Lucas Graham redefines farm to table dining." My phone exploded with messages from friends in the industry. "Didn't you design this? Why isn't your name in the article?" I stared at the page until the words blurred. The reporter had quoted Lucas saying, "We wanted to create a space that reflects my belief in local sustainability." My belief. I stormed into his office, printout in hand. "You erased me," I said. He looked up, unimpressed. "It's not about ego, Elena. It's about ownership. You're the talent. I'm the vision. Without my concept, there is no vision," I snapped. He smiled, that same calm predator smile. "Then be proud. You're part of something bigger than yourself." Something inside me cracked. For the first time, I saw him clearly not as a partner, but as a thief dressed in charisma. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, Naomi called. "You should lawyer up," she said, her voice clipped. "With what money?" I asked. "You think I can fight his legal team?" "You can't outspend him, but you can outsmart him," she said. Get proof. Get allies. He'll hang himself if you give him enough rope. I wanted to believe her, but exhaustion dulled everything. I kept showing up, doing the work, teaching the staff my recipes, my plating, my systems. Every bit of myself poured into something I no longer trusted. When Lucas finally pulled the trigger, I wasn't surprised. It happened on a Thursday morning. The dining room was still half in shadow from the rain outside. He stood in the middle of it, designer coat draped over one arm, phone glowing in his hand. "Elena," he said, "we're going in a different direction." I laughed, an ugly, sharp sound that bounced off the marble. "You're firing me 2 weeks before opening?" "Creative differences," he said simply. "It's all in the contract. You'll get your severance." I wanted to throw something at him, anything, but all I could do was stare. "You planned this." He looked up finally, eyes flat. "You're talented, but you lack scale. The Alder needs prestige. I've hired someone who can deliver that." That someone was Chef Donovan Reed, a James Beard Award winner flown in from New York. A man Lucas would parade in front of cameras, using my menu, my kitchen, my story. When I left that day, the rain had stopped. The street smelled like wet concrete and betrayal. I stood across from the hotel, clutching a box of my belongings, when I noticed the vacant storefront opposite. The sign in the window read, "For lease." A cracked bell above the door rattled in the wind, and for some reason, I smiled. That night, I called Riley Chen, my best friend since college, and one of Portland's sharpest food critics. She answered on the first ring. "I heard," she said, "the industry's buzzing. He stole your concept, didn't he?" "Yes," my voice trembled. "Every damn piece of it." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted, steel under silk, just like mine. "Then let's give him a show he'll never forget." We met at our old haunt, a coffee shop called Hazel & Co. The place smelled like roasted beans and old wood. Riley listened while I laid everything out: the contract, the recipes, the betrayal. She didn't interrupt, just scribbled notes on a napkin. When I finished, she leaned forward. "See that empty building across from the Alder?" I nodded. "Lease it. Turn it into something fast, raw, honest. Make it the anti-Alder." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely. You have the heart, the following, and the story. You don't need his name. You need your own fire." The idea was reckless, impossible, and yet something inside me sparked. Maybe it was anger, or grief, or both, but it felt alive. 2 days later, I met Hannah Moore, the building's owner. She was in her 50s, elegant in a threadbare cardigan. The space had exposed brick, warped floors, and a back room that smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. "What do you plan to do here?" she asked. I told her the truth. "I want to open a restaurant that feeds people, not egos." She smiled faintly. "Across from the Alder?" "Yes." Her eyes glimmered. "You know, I used to be married to one of Graham's investors." I froze. "You're kidding." "Not even a little," she said. "He left me for a younger woman and a bigger portfolio." She extended her hand. "Lease starts Monday. Let's make them choke on their own luxury." That night, I lay awake in my small apartment, surrounded by recipe notebooks and sketches. The city hummed outside cars, rain gutters, the distant bark of a dog. I thought about Mom's words, about Naomi's pragmatism, about every kitchen I'd ever worked in. I thought about the people Lucas would charm and discard next. And then, slowly, a plan began to take shape. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was reclamation. I called Ben the next morning. "You busy? For you?" he said. "Never." "Good," I said. "We're opening a restaurant." He laughed. "You serious?" "As a heart attack." There was silence. Then his voice softened. "Then let's burn it bright." I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of Solace. I remember the first morning we stepped inside that old space, with buckets of paint and a borrowed espresso machine. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight like confetti. The air smelled of sawdust and hope. Ben rolled up his sleeves. "You think we can pull this off?" I looked across the street at the Alder's shining windows and said, "We don't have to outshine them. We just have to outlast them." At that moment, I didn't realize how true that would become. The first week inside, Solace felt like standing in a half-built cathedral. We had faith, noise, and no money. The floorboards creaked, the oven barely held temperature, and every morning, I woke up with paint on my hands instead of sleep in my eyes. But we had momentum, the kind that fear couldn't kill. Ben handled the kitchen setup while I begged, borrowed, and bartered for everything else. Riley became our unofficial PR arm, whispering to her media contacts about a secret project brewing across from the Alder. Ava Miles, a social media strategist I'd met once at a food conference, DM'd me out of nowhere. I heard what Lucas did. Let's make him irrelevant. She offered to handle promotion in exchange for a small equity cut. I said yes before my doubts could speak. Our first soft test came at midnight on a Thursday. No paying guests, just friends, a mix of farmers, ex-Alder staff, and a few brave foodies Riley had roped in. The menu was stripped to the bone. Roasted beets with goat cheese, cider braised pork shoulder, and a buttermilk pie that tasted like memory. When I looked up and saw people closing their eyes as they ate, I felt something shift. The noise in my head quieted. Across the street, the Alder blazed with spotlights. Construction crews worked past midnight, polishing every inch of Lucas's marble empire. Every time I caught a glimpse of that glowing logo, I felt equal parts fury and determination. We didn't have chandeliers or imported wine, but we had soul. And that, I told myself, was the one thing he couldn't counterfeit. Then came the first punch. An email from Graham Hospitality's lawyers landed in my inbox. Cease and desist. Intellectual property infringement regarding culinary concept, harvest table. My hands went cold. They accused me of stealing my own idea. Naomi drove in from Eugene that night. She walked into Solace with her laptop and that lawyer face she'd perfected, calm, razor sharp. He's bluffing, she said. He's counting on you to panic. Don't. Just keep records. Everything. Ben slammed a tray down. He's scared, he muttered. Means we're doing something right. He was repeating this wine, but fear still gnawed at me. I couldn't afford a lawsuit. One leak to the press, and we'd be painted as the knockoff. That night, I went home and opened the box where I kept Mom's old recipe cards. She'd written notes on every one tiny details about serving people, not plates. If it comes from love, one read, they'll taste it. I ran my fingers over the ink until I stopped shaking. The next morning, I called Riley. Post something, I said. But make it cryptic. By noon, her Instagram had a new caption over a photo of Solace's unfinished front window. A new soul is cooking across the street. Authenticity has a new address. It exploded. Local foodies started guessing what the restaurant was. Some thought it was a pop-up. Others speculated it was a collab between me and a celebrity chef. I didn't confirm or deny any of it. The mystery worked better than any press release. Meanwhile, the Alder launched its PR blitz. Billboards with Lucas's face went up around downtown Portland, a new standard in culinary excellence. His grin was everywhere. It should have crushed me, but instead, it made people curious. A few reporters reached out, asking if it was true I'd been fired. I didn't respond. Let silence tell its own story. Then, the second punch landed harder. A blog post surfaced, citing anonymous sources who claimed I'd been emotionally unstable, impossible to work with, and obsessed with control. It had Lucas's fingerprints all over it. For 2 days, I couldn't leave my apartment. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends and ex-colleagues. Some offered support. Others offered pity. On the third morning, Naomi showed up with coffee. He's trying to bury you before you bloom, she said. So bloom louder. That same afternoon, I got a surprise call. Elena Crawford? The voice was low. Male. This is Donovan Reed. The name hit me like a slap. The Alder's new head chef. The one Lucas hired to replace me. I'm not calling to gloat, he said quickly. I saw what he did to you. I want you to know I didn't know he stole your concept until I arrived. It was already built. Your name scrubbed from everything. It's grotesque. Then why stay? I asked, colder than I intended. I have a contract too, he said softly. But if there's any justice left in this industry, I'll find a way to set things right. He hung up before I could answer. But that call did something Lucas's smear campaign couldn't. It lit a fuse. That night, Ben and I sat on milk crates, eating leftover pie straight from the tin. We're going to open on the same night as him, I said suddenly. Ben nearly choked. You're insane. Maybe, I said. But if he wants a show, we'll give him one. He grinned. Then let's make it unforgettable. I didn't know it then, but that decision would turn our tiny dream into a citywide spectacle and a war neither of us could walk away from. Once we decided to open the same night as the Alder, Every waking minute became a countdown. 10 days. That's all we had to build a restaurant from sawdust and stubbornness. Hannah, our landlord, brought in old tables from her garage. "They've seen love," she said, wiping dust with her sleeve. "People will feel it." Ava plastered social media with teasers, photos of hands kneading dough, carrots dripping water into a tin sink, captions that read, "You can't fake flavor." We weren't ready. Not even close. The stove kept tripping breakers. The paint was still tacky on the walls. And Ben burned the first 3 batches of bread because the oven door didn't seal right, but each failure stitched us tighter together. The more we broke, the more determined we became to hold. Across the street, the Alder glittered. Trucks unloaded boxes stamped with French logos. Delivery men carried in polished cutlery like weapons. Every morning, Lucas arrived in his tailored coat, trailed by assistants who didn't make eye contact. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing our way. Once, our eyes met through the glass. He smirked, a slow, practiced expression that said, "You'll never touch me." He underestimated hunger. 5 days before launch, Naomi found me asleep on the prep counter, head on my folded arms. "You look like hell," she said, dropping a paper bag beside me. Inside was a turkey sandwich and a printed letter. "What's this?" "Your cease and desist," she said. I drafted a response. Legal, calm, boring, everything Lucas hates. I smiled for the first time that day. "You really are my sister." "Yeah," she said quietly. "Just don't make me regret it." 3 days before opening, a storm rolled through Portland. Rain slammed against the windows, and thunder shook the ceiling tiles loose. Ben was fixing a vent when his phone buzzed. He looked down, frowned, then handed it to me. The Alder opening gala, exclusive invitation. It had come from Graham Hospitality's mailing list. Lucas was sending invites to every food critic in town, including Riley. "Let him have his party," I said. "We'll have a story." That night, Riley called me. "You sure you want to go head-to-head? That's suicide." "No," I said, staring out the window at the glowing hotel sign. "It's survival." She was quiet for a beat. "Then I'll be there." Camera in hand. 2 nights before opening, we ran our first full rehearsal dinner. The power went out twice. A pipe burst under the sink, and Ben sliced his hand open on a mandolin. But the food sang. Roasted duck with plum glaze, parsnip soup with smoked salt, an apple tart that tasted like forgiveness. When the last plate came back empty, I knew we were ready. The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "Check the papers." My stomach twisted. I grabbed my phone and saw the headline, "Former chef accused of sabotaging the Alder's preparations." The article claimed I'd stolen suppliers, spread rumors, even tried to bribe staff. Lies. All of it. Lucas had gone nuclear. Ben slammed the paper on the counter. "He's scared. Only scared men fight this dirty." Riley burst through the door 15 minutes later, soaked from the rain. "Congratulations," she said, waving her phone. "You're trending." "What?" "Number Team Elena. People are defending you. Local chefs, foodies, customers. Someone leaked his investor emails showing how he planned to cut farm contracts after opening. He's done." I stared at her. "Who leaked them?" She shrugged. "Anonymous source. Could have been an angel, could have been karma." Later that night, I'd find out the truth that it was Donovan Reed, Lucas's own head chef, the man he paraded as my replacement. But that revelation was still days away. For now, I felt the first tremor of momentum shifting. 2 days to go. Solace finally had lights, tables, and a menu printed on recycled paper. The smell of yeast and thyme filled the air. People walking by stopped to peek through the windows. One woman pressed her hand to the glass and mouthed, "Good luck." On the final morning, we gathered in the tiny dining room. Me, Ben, Riley, Ava, and Hannah. I looked at their faces, all exhausted and hopeful. "Whatever happens tonight," I said, "we do it our way. No pretense, no PR, just heart." Ben raised a coffee cup. "To Solace," he said. "To Solace," we echoed. Across the street, the Alder's doors gleamed under spotlights. Photographers clustered on the sidewalk. Guests in silk and suits spilled out of black cars. I stood at our window, wiping my palms on my apron, and whispered to myself, "Let's feed them the truth." I didn't know it yet, but by midnight, Portland would be talking about only one restaurant, and it wouldn't be the Alder. The night of our opening arrived like a held breath. Portland was slick with rain, the kind that glistened on the cobblestones and made every streetlight shimmer. Across the street, the Alder looked like a movie set, spotlights sweeping the air, luxury cars pulling up in slow succession, guests wrapped in velvet and ambition. Their laughter echoed faintly across the road, sharp as glass. Inside Solace, everything was smaller, humbler, but alive. Candles flickered in mismatched jars. The walls smelled faintly of lemon oil and wood smoke. Steam curled from open pans, the air thick with butter and thyme. There were no tablecloths, no tuxedos, just warmth. You could feel it in the laughter, in the way people leaned closer instead of apart. Ben stood beside me at the pass, apron streaked with flour. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," he smirked. "They've got flashbulbs. We've got fire." The first course went out roasted beet salad with whipped goat cheese, topped with candied walnuts and a drizzle of local honey. A quiet murmur spread through the dining room, the sound of surprise and delight. People weren't just eating, they were listening. Every dish told a story of farms, rain, soil, of starting over. Halfway through the night, Riley appeared at the bar, camera slung around her neck. "You're trending again," she said. Someone at the Alder leaked a photo of their half-empty dining room. People are walking out mid-service. I blinked. "What?" "They're saying the food looks lifeless. Overstyled, under-seasoned," Ben laughed. "Guess money can't buy taste." A burst of commotion outside cut through the music. Through the window, I saw umbrellas part, and a familiar figure striding across the street. Lucas Graham. He was still immaculate gray suit, slicked hair, but there was something different about him tonight. His eyes darted toward our windows, taking in the packed room, the laughter, the lights. He hesitated, then came in. Conversations faltered. Forks paused mid-air. He walked straight to the counter where I was plating the next dish. "Elena," he said, voice smooth but trembling around the edges. "We need to talk." "I'm a little busy," I said, arranging roasted duck slices with tongs. "If you want a reservation, we're booked for the next 6 weeks." A few guests laughed softly. Cameras lifted. Riley was already rolling. Lucas's jaw tightened. "You're using my concept, my suppliers, Your what?" I cut in, looking up. "Your vision? Or my work that you renamed?" Color flushed his face. "You signed a contract, and you broke it the second you erased my name," I said quietly. "But don't worry, everyone here knows who cooked this meal." He turned toward the guests, searching for support. But instead of sympathy, he met phones, lenses, whispers. The power had shifted. I could feel it in the air, a hum like static before lightning. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "She's right." Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was Donovan Reed, the Alder's replacement chef. His crisp white jacket was streaked with rain. He looked directly at Lucas. "You lied to me," he said. "You said this concept was yours. But this," he gestured around Solace, "this is what you described. Down to the last ingredient." Lucas's expression froze, his face a portrait of disbelief. "You don't know what you're talking about." But Donovan didn't flinch. "I do. I've seen the original blueprints. Her handwriting's on them." Riley's camera light blinked red. Phones lifted higher. Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but another voice interrupted from the back of the room. "I can confirm that." It was Victor Hale, the Alder's primary investor, standing near the bar with a glass of wine in hand. "I heard about Harvest Table from Elena Crawford a full year before you ever mentioned it to me, Lucas. I invested because of her vision, and I see now who's truly delivering it." The entire room seemed to exhale. Lucas swayed slightly, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. He tried to recover, smoothing his suit. "This is slander," he muttered. "You're making a mistake." Victor sipped his wine. "The only mistake was trusting you." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it pulsed. Guests exchanged glances, murmurs rippling like waves. Someone started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the room erupted in applause, not polite, but fierce, a standing ovation that drowned out the rain outside. Lucas turned to leave, but I stopped him with one last sentence. "Next time you build a dream," I said, "make sure it's yours to steal." He froze, jaw tight, then walked out into the storm. When the door swung shut behind him, I realized my hands were trembling not from anger, but from release. For months, I'd carried the weight of silence. Now it was gone, The truth had cooked itself into every corner of this room. Ben leaned over, whispering, "You just torched him." I smiled, voice steady. "No, I just fed him his own medicine." Later that night, as the guests lingered over dessert brown butter cake with sage honey, Riley pulled me aside. "You know this clip is already viral, right? Chef faces her thief. 500,000 views in an hour." I laughed softly. "Let it spread. I'm done hiding." Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. Through the window, I could see the Alder. Its lights dimmer now, shadows moving behind half-empty tables. For the first time in months, I felt warmth settle in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, something quieter, something whole. I turned back to the kitchen, wiped my hands, and whispered to myself, "Service isn't over yet." The next morning, Portland woke up buzzing. By noon, every local outlet had run some version of the story, the chef who outsmarted the Alder. Clips of Lucas standing red-faced in my restaurant looped on morning shows, dissected by reporters who'd once ignored my emails. My phone didn't stop vibrating. Interview requests, offers, congratulations from chefs I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't answer any of them. I just stood by the window of Solace, watching the street come alive. Across the road, the Alder's valet stand was gone. The lights inside were off. Through the glass, you could still see empty wine glasses scattered like ghosts of a party that ended too soon. Ben walked in carrying 2 coffees. "You see the paper?" he asked. "No," I said. "I don't need to." He grinned. "Front page." Hale pulled his investment. "The Alder's already closing for, we're structuring. Guess that's corporate for, we're screwed." I smiled, but quietly. There was no joy in watching something die, even if it was built on stolen bones. "Let's not celebrate," I said softly. "Let's just build." That night, we kept the lights on later than usual. People stopped by, farmers, customers, strangers, just to say thank you. Someone left a bouquet of wildflowers on the counter with a note. "You gave us back what food was supposed to feel like." When the crowd finally thinned, I sat alone at the bar, tracing my finger around the rim of a wine glass. Riley joined me, camera slung over her shoulder. "You know this isn't the end, right?" she said. "I know," I replied. "It's just the start." She smiled. "What's next? You gonna expand? Franchise?" I shook my head. "No. That's what he would do. I want Solace to stay real, small enough to taste every story we tell." As I spoke, my phone buzzed a new email notification. The sender's name froze me. Donovan Reed. The subject line read, "An idea." I opened it slowly. What if we took Solace on the road? Pop-ups in small towns, local farms, teaching people what this industry forgot, that cooking is connection. I stared at the screen, a slow warmth spreading through me. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was restoration. I looked up at Riley, smiling. "They thought they buried me," I said. "But all they did was plant me deeper." Outside, the rain had stopped. The street glistened in the lamplight. Across the way, the Alder's sign flickered once, then went dark for good. I poured the last glass of wine, raised it to no one in particular, and whispered, "To creation." If you've ever been underestimated, or had someone take credit for your work, you know that fire. It burns quiet at first, then turns into the kind that forges you. So before you go, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ashes of someone else's betrayal. Because this story, my story, isn't really about revenge. It's about creation, and the strength that comes after the storm. And trust me, this story isn't over.